Today I'm bringing you my top late round dynasty players that you should be going out and drafting in your dynasty startups. I know a lot of people have already finished their rookie drafts and are maybe waiting for their second or third or however many leagues you are in league to start and have your drafts, right? So I'm trying to bring you some good late round values or maybe some mid to late round guys that you should be going out and drafting in your leagues. But before we get into it, make sure you drop a like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know which player is a good late round value player that you can't wait to draft in your dynasty startups. And as always, before we get into it, go to flockfantasy.com/land, the best place to get your fantasy advice, not only from myself and Zach, but all the other content creators on there. I mean, we have so many good things, rankings, articles, bonus content. Now you can submit, and if you want to be part of this community, you can submit your own articles. You can submit your community rankings as well, which is really exciting. We want you to be a part of this site as much as we are. So make sure, once again, go to flockfantasy.com/land, get 30% off at sign up. And not only that, you can get a fantasy hotline with straight communication with Zach and myself, a dynasty team grade, and so much more. So once again, flockfantasy.com/land, get 30% off and a 2-day free trial. Let's get straight into the video. Before I get into the players, I just want to preference this by saying I did say late round dynasty startup players, and for some people late round can be 7th, 8th, 9th round, and some of you guys can be 15th, 16th, 17th round. So definitely keep this with an open interpretation when I do say late round dynasty startups, because some of these players I'm bringing maybe that are getting drafted in the 8th round, in the 9th round, and for you that may not be late, but for somebody else it may be. But anyways, as always, it's all love, and let's get straight into it. My first late round must draft player that you should be going out and trying to get in your dynasty startups, or maybe trading for him in your leagues right now, that is James Cook. James Cook currently right now, according to community, is RB25. In our last dynasty startup, he went at the 9-10, and sometimes maybe in your leagues, maybe going even later or earlier. But once again, all depends on the league. But some things that I really wanted to bring up and bring to you guys' attention is how efficient he was on the ground. But before we get into that, let's really address the elephant in the room with Damien Harris. There's no doubt Damien Harris is going to have a role in this offense. My initial thought process is that he is going to be the goal line back. He's going to be the guy that's going to be able to punch the ball in difficult times where they don't want to really utilize Josh Allen and put his body at risk. Obviously, he's the quarterback. Not saying that he can't carry a first and second down workload, but I personally have always believed that James Cook was a guy and is a guy that can carry a first, second, and third down workload, and especially according to the stats I'm going to be bringing you here very soon. So both James Cook and Damien Harris are both late round guys that you should be going out and trying to acquire or picking up or drafting in your dynasty startups. But let me get to the reasons why I believe in James Cook and why I believe he could actually be outsnapped and getting out carrying Damien Harris maybe going into the end of this 2023 season. So some really interesting facts here is his efficiency, right? True yards per carry. Well, he was 5.3 yards per carry on the ground. He was second amongst running backs with minimum of 80 carries. And the first running back there was Breece Hall. Obviously, he tore his ACL. He was due for a very good season. But James Cook, when he really didn't get the opportunity to the second half of the season, he was still second in true yards per carry, which I think is really efficient on the ground. Second is breakaway runs, rate runs, and he was first with 15 yards or more per carry in the breakaway runs in that category for James Cook. But something that I also thought was so interesting was the light front carry rate. And when you really look at that, he was 5th in the light front carry rate. It's kind of difficult to say. That is the percentage of carries with 6 or fewer defenders in the box. And when I saw that, that really got me thinking to how defenses are scripting their games when they do face Josh Allen in this offense, and especially the way they drafted this year by drafting Dalton Kincaid, by still having Stephon Diggs, by having a dual threat quarterback in Josh Allen. They're not necessarily worried about the run game. Maybe Damien Harris changed that. Maybe James Cook does change that coming into the 2023 season. But if Devin Singletary didn't get them scared, I don't think that Damien Harris is going to get them scared. And I think James Cook can also still be this be the #1 or top 5 running back and breakaway runs coming into the 2023 season, or at the end of the 2023 season. So when you think of the script, when you think of the efficiency, and when you think of what James Cook has done already so far, I think that is something that we need to take into account. And something that I also really looked into was, when did James Cook really get this opportunity? And I think when you really look at his workload throughout the season, it's very scattered, right? Week 1, only 1 attempt. And then he goes to week 2 with 11 carries. But let me remind you, that was against Tennessee, where they won 41-7. So they sat the first team offense by the middle of the third quarter. Then he really didn't get a workload all the way until week 11, where he had 11 carries for 86 yards. And I think that's where you officially see James Cook get his opportunity, which was week 11. And then he was going up and down in this roller coaster where you didn't really see him onto the fields. And then you see him again in week 13 against New England with 14 carries, 64 yards, right? And then he was getting the work in the air with 6 receptions and 6 targets, right? That was his first top 15 finish in a running back perspective in the fantasy that week. He finished RB13 with 16.5 fantasy points per game. So now that he's taking over the Devin Singletary role, as in the pass catching guy, because Devin Singletary was a first and second down and really was a third down guy as well, because at that time they didn't trust James as much. So now that Devin Singletary is gone, Damian Harris is in, James Cook is going to be stepping in to this third down workload, which I really believe is significant, especially with what Devin Singletary is leaving behind in the air. Let me remind you, last year, Devin Singletary had 52 targets in the air, in the backfield last year as a running back. And James Cook this past year as well had 32. So that means there was 84 targets accounted to the running back position. And not that Damian Harris can't catch a ball, but he's not somebody that we're going to be, and the Buffalo Bills aren't going to be relying on in the pass catching game. So this kind of really, once again, brings me back to why James Cook, I believe, can be leading this backfield. And he's going depending on your leagues, from round 9s or later. Sometimes you can't see him higher depending if there's a James Cook believer in your league. But at the moment, in our community, in our dynasty startups, in our lives, in our live streams, he's going as late as the 9th round, almost 10th round. And if you can get James Cook right now for a really good price, I think that is phenomenal, especially if you haven't done your rookie drafts at the moment and you have a mid-second right now. You can be trading that away to acquire James Cook, who is, in my opinion, significantly better than the running backs coming in. I know a lot of people may disagree, but I'd rather have James Cook over a Kendre Miller, over a Roscoe Johnson, over Tank Bigsby. Obviously, you can really take that as you wish, but that's how it works in my rankings right now. So if you can, and you do have the opportunity coming in soon in the Dynasty Startup, I'll be trying to draft James Cook as a really good late round running back. My second late round must draft player that you should be going out and trying to acquire in your dynasty startups right now is Kenny Pickett. Yes, two glove Kenny. Look, some leagues he obviously may be going earlier, but in our league is just trying to look at the past couple mock drafts that we had. He's going anywhere between the 7th and 8th round. Sometimes he could be going early in other communities. Sometimes he could be going later in other communities. But as of right now, 7th, 8th round in our community in our last dynasty startup mock draft. But look, Kenny coming into this past year is actually really interesting, right? I mean, he was a guy drafted in the 1st round. We thought we would sold him right off the back coming into the season, but actually they went with Mitch Trubisky. He played the first 3 games of the season until we saw Kenny really take the reins after week 4. In week 4 came in, he does get injured if I'm not mistaken, and then he gets a concussion coming in and out of games all throughout the season. Kenny and Mitch Trubisky really flopping back and forth with the injuries. But something that is really exciting and really interesting, and why I'm really a buy-in for Kenny Pickett, not only as a late round must draft player, but a guy I really believe in, a quarterback I really believe that could be a breakout coming into the 2023 season, maybe even finish as a top 15, top 12 quarterback, especially with the team around him. That's Kenny Pickett, obviously. So, and the reasons why is, once again, the weapons around him: Najee Harris, right? Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Pat Fryermuth. They drafted Darnell Washington, one of the biggest, we call him an offensive lineman or a great blocker or a guy that can be a threat, right? A lot of people really think he has the athleticism to come in. They also acquire Allen Robinson in a trade. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of think of in Najee Harris, obviously. There's a lot of things you can really think of why Kenny Pickett can take the next step. But I think the biggest thing is this offensive line. The offensive line was terrible this past year in trying to protect Kenny Pickett and trying to give him time, and even giving Najee Harris time and holes in the pocket. But now what do they do in the first round of the 2023 draft? They draft Broderick Jones. They make some offseason moves. They're developing offensive lines, coming into a whole nother year with this offensive line that is developing. Obviously, they move some pieces around. They maybe lose some pieces as well. But I do believe coming into a second year with Mike Tomlin, one of the best head coaches in Steelers history, trying to develop Kenny Pickett, clearly drafting him in the first round in those past year's draft. I think it's phenomenal. I think this is why I really am leaning into Kenny and saying, you know what, I really believe he can be a step up coming into the 2023 season. Something really interesting that I found was that all of Kenny Pickett's highest PFF passing grades came after week 12. And he was doing his thing, right? Week 12 PFF grade, passing grade was 86.3. Week 13, 72.5. Week 16, 73.1. Week 17, 90.9. Week 18, 73.5. So he was averaging a really, really good passing grade in the last 5 weeks of the season, where we saw a 63% completion rate coming out of him for the whole season. And mind you, he only played 12 to 13 games, depending on how many games you will count him coming in and out, right? Threw for over 2,400 yards and 7 touchdowns. And let's not forget that Kenny Pickett can run a little bit. And this is not somebody that we're going to be leaning on in the running game, but he can move out of the pocket and he can create space with his legs, which we have seen in the past out in Pitt when he originally came from. Let me remind you, when in Pittsburgh in his last year, his senior season over there in 2021, 28 attempts, over 440 yards on the ground, averaging 5.6 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. Look, I'm not saying that Kenny Pickett is a massive rushing upside quarterback, but once again, he can use his legs and he knows how to evade and make people miss. So that is something that we can't take for granted, and something that he has in his arsenal, in his list of accolades that he can really lean on if the pressure is still there. So once again, he is getting drafted in the later rounds of a dynasty starter, mid to late rounds, once again, depending on your leagues. But Kenny Pickett, a guy coming into the 2023 season that has all the weapons, that have the head coaching mindset around him, that has invested in this offensive line. Not only that, they do draft a tight end to help in that offensive line. So essentially, they draft 2 offensive linemen, right? That also one that can catch and one that can clearly block, and Broderick Jones, with still the weapons around him, I think could easily take a massive step coming into the 2023 season. And for a price that is actually really, really interesting. Zach brought out a video of what you should be acquiring and the picks, sell picks for players. And something that, I don't remember if he did allude to this in a quarterback room, but if he did say this, I think we will both agree. We are happy to sell the 110, the 111, the 112 for someone like a Kenny Pickett. So if you haven't done your rookie drafts as of yet, and you're looking for a quarterback, and you're saying, well, I don't really want a Will Levis, or I didn't get a top five pick in my rookie drafts, but I still need to get a quarterback, and I have a first round pick, try to sell the 112 to the 110 to the 112 and try to acquire Kenny Pickett. Once again, a young, well, not really young, but a second year quarterback, essentially, that has got the first round draft capital, that is clearly going to be the quarterback for the future, at least for the next 3 years, for this Pittsburgh Steelers team that has the weapons around him. I think that's exactly what I want to do, exactly how I want to build my roster. And once again, Kenny Pickett coming in with Broderick Jones, Najee Harris, George Pickens, Jalen Warren, Pat the Dragon, right? All these teams, Deontay Johnson, all these players and these weapons around him could easily take a massive step going into the 2023 season. So try and get him if you can. My last must draft player in the late rounds of your dynasty startups that you should be going on trying to draft right now or even trade for, depending on how your leagues are. Chig Okonkwo, tight end for the Tennessee Titans. He is somebody that I am really excited about, and I think a lot of the fantasy community are as well. He is currently tight end 13, according as I'm recording this video, according to Keep Trade Cut, and I think he can either be rising or potentially falling depending on how some of these rookie tight ends are going to be valued right now. But one of the reasons why I love Chig is because of how this Tennessee Titan has drafted this past year, the 2023 draft, and they didn't bring anyone to really compete with any of these wide receivers or any of these tight ends. And let me tell you who they did draft. Peter Skoronski in the first was their first round pick. They trade up for Will Levis. They draft Tajay Spears in the 3rd round, who doesn't have a knee. And then, then they get, some unrestricted free agent wide receivers, and then they draft a wide receiver in the 7th round. But doesn't necessarily worry me. It's which really leaves this team with essentially the same amount of wide receivers. I would say less actually wide receivers, because Roberto Woods is no longer there, right? So now you have Treylon Burks, Nick Ikini, Westbrook Ikini, Kyle Phillips, and now Chig Okonkwo. And I think that's exactly who we should be leaning on coming in as a second option for this team, with Treylon Burks leading the wide receiver room. And Zach has been the biggest believer in Treylon Burks, and maybe I should be leaning towards Treylon. I mean, I didn't really love Treylon Burks coming in, but Zach, with all the information now doing it with Chig, I think Treylon Burks can see a massive step, just like Chig can see a massive step coming into this season. And let me tell you why we can see a massive step is because what we've seen in this past year with Chig, with the limited amount of games that we saw from him. And according to PFF, ranked 5th amongst tight ends out of 37 tight ends with 25 plus targets this past year. Yards per route run, he was first with 2.75. Yards per reception, he was first with 18.3. And then targets per route run, he was 3rd with 25%. Chig Okonkwo is coming into his 2nd year with less people demanding targets, and with also Austin Hooper no longer on this team, with also Roberto Woods no longer on this team, coming in with a quarterback that needs to prove it again to stay as the #1 quarterback on his team, right? So he's going to be doing everything to try and maintain his job and make this team and this offense as efficient as possible. And Chig, once again, coming into his 2nd year with demanding in all these targets, I'm trying to acquire Chig and draft Chig in as many leagues as I possibly can. Going in the late 13, 14, 15 rounds of your dynasty startup. He's currently valued as a tight end 13, which means that is a mid to late 2nd round pick in your rookie drafts. And if you have Michael Mayer off the board and Sam Laporta off the board, and you're not really in love with Luke Musgrave, or you're not really in love with Tucker Kraft, and you really want somebody that is stepping into a 2nd year with not that much competition, Chig Okonkwo you could be getting him for a late to maybe even 3rd, if you can stretch it, an early 3rd round pick right now in your rookie drafts. So guys, these are my top 3 guys: Chig Okonkwo, Kenny Pickett, and James Cook. These are all the guys, depending on your leagues, once again, and how your leagues draft. These are some of my best late round and my favorite late round must draft players in your dynasty startups coming into the 2023 season. Let me know, comment down below which players you like, which players I missed, which players you wish I put on this list. Let's have a conversation. And as always, it's all love.
Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, L-A-N-D, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy, even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.